Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm your host, as always, and I'm going to bring you a ray of sunshine in what has been a bit of a glum week for Rangers by introducing my guest, David Edgar. David, thank you so much for coming on this week.
Hello, Cameron.
David, we're doing a bit of an amalgamation of both the flagship and extra this week because of the way how the fixtures have kind of landed. So we've got a wee bit to unpack, I think it's fair to say. Before we get into the detail of it and stuff as well, how are you feeling now a couple of days after Hampden and Tuesday night?
Pretty flat, in all honesty. I think that a lot of things have crystallised over the summer and where we are currently. And I think we saw the outcome of that on Tuesday night. And, you know, I don't think there's any arguing that we are weaker as a side than we were last season. And, you know, the manager has said that he expects this team to grow, and that's great. But where we are currently is not in a good place. And then, of course, Cammy, you do have to factor in that we were on the end of an absolutely scandal and refereeing decision, and that completely takes the wind out your sails because of the sheer unfairness of it. I don't think that blinds anybody, though, to the issues. I don't think anyone is fooled by it. I think we may well have gone through, had it stayed 11v11, but we'll never know. And there's no point trying to grasp onto that. The end result of the two games is that we are out. The financial blow is huge. And I think that there is, among the Rangers support at the moment, a great deal of anger, resignation, which is even worse, and frustration. So, yeah, it's not been a good week. The only way out of this is for the side to start winning games and playing well. And, you know, we're 4 games into the season and we've won 1, barely. So I think the feelings of support are totally justified because of where we sit today. There's a great deal of frustration about it. And I think in part that the club, they need to face up to the reasons for that. I think, you know, obviously the lack of success of the last few years is one thing, but then I think when you promise a rebuild and then you get to 2 weeks by the end of the window and the squad looks patently weaker than the one that wasn't good enough last season, then you have to expect the criticism because you deserve it.
Well, I think that that's an interesting point to kind of kick off with, because I want to talk to you a little bit about the manager's selection for Tuesday night. We won't rehash old ground by saying that, you know, we've not seen the, I'm going to say, ready-made investment to come in, because we have signed players. However, they are not, some of them are not fit enough to be involved yet. We've obviously got players who are coming back from injury. We'll talk about them in short order. But it was interesting, I think, David, in the way how the manager approached it on Tuesday night. He opted for Ross McCausland on the right-hand side instead of Vladimir Cherny. Jeffy reprised his role in front of Ridvan on the left-hand side as well. Connor Barron came in, Robin Proper obviously started. Barron, I think, has kind of been a mainstay since coming in for the club. I think it felt a lot to me, looking at that lineup, that the manager wanted to keep his game changers in his pocket, as it were. I think he wanted to almost go out with, I'll say, a kind of degree of caution. I think he just didn't want to be able to risk it too early on, and that's why he didn't start him. Had, as you say, things gone in a different direction and we had kept 11 men on the park, then there is a chance that gamble could have paid off. But it's interesting, though, because I think for the first 45 minutes of the game on Tuesday night, that didn't feel much to me in terms of being able to try and get out of what felt like a pedestrian gear. There were some chances created, but not much to kind of talk about. We did the post-match on our Patreon site, and honestly, when I was sitting with the boys, I was struggling to remember any real concerted chances that developed in the first 45 minutes. And then when you look at the entire tie, that's a quarter of it, as far as I'm concerned, as a missed opportunity. Do you feel the manager was right in his initial approach? We obviously take the red card into context, of course, but I think that for me, part of that frustration and why I'm still feeling a bit kind of down after Tuesday is just we did have the opportunity to go into it. We got the last-minute equaliser across in Poland. We got a win against Motherwell at Hampden on Saturday to keep that momentum going and to be able just to try and get a bit of energy into it. And it just felt to me the first 45, it just wasn't there.
Yeah, I got what he was doing. I would tend to say start your better players early in case the game is taken away from you early, But I think he would point and say, well, it was 0-0 at half time when Czerny came on, and had we not had that red card, then the plan may well have worked. And that is valid. But I think that there's also, when you don't get through, then you're going to be liable to criticism, and everything gets second guessed. I don't think Rangers were terrible the other night. I don't think Rangers have been terrible in any of the games. I don't think we've been particularly good either. That's the issue. And I think that the other night was an example of that. They were slick on the ball, but I thought defensively you could get at them. And I think Rangers were taking control of a fairly even game in the second half. I thought that Kiev had the best of the opening 20, but then I thought Rangers were more in control. Without either team, you have to say, making any real clear-cut chances. Cammy, they had a couple fizzed across the box. We had a couple of bouncing balls in the box. But without either team really, putting the other side under intense pressure. So it was a fairly even game. And to be honest, from about 30 minutes in, I thought first goal the winner. And of course, sadly, it turned out that way when the game was altered with Jefty's red card. So I think that in terms of who he had available, I could see the logic in it. I wouldn't do it. It doesn't mean that I'm right. I would always play the best players early. But he spoke about Czerny, the fact that he thought he could come on when the other team were tiring and do a bit more. And I can understand that. You can see the logic there. But yeah, in the end, we weren't able to get ourselves into a lead early, which maybe would have made playing with 10 men a bit more straightforward.
I thought, and we'll get the referee out of the way, I think, early doors, if that's all right, David, because I think that, as you're rightly saying, listen, I think something that we always pride ourselves on this podcast is that we will always be balanced and fair. And to that point, I think that the referee, I think for me, was pretty weak. From pretty much early doors in the first half and from when the game started, you could see that Kiev were making a big amount of their challenges against them. There was, going down quite a lot. There was some head holding, etc. And a little bit of dark arts employed to be able to try and break up the game and try and disrupt a bit of rhythm. And listen, do you know what? I don't necessarily blame them for that. We've seen plenty of teams do that against us. I thought that the referee was buying it. But equally in balance, the first Jefty booking was 100% a nailed-on booking. It was a late challenge and it was silly. However, when we get to the second yellow, this for me is it's one of the worst decisions I think I've ever seen in a game of football, and it's compounded by the fact that it's at this level. You and I could watch this, as we have done with plenty of Scottish domestic games, and go, that's just terrible refereeing, but we expect that standard to be lower. I think that the referee has been coerced by the antics of the Dynamo Kiev players in the run-up to it. But then at this point, I was bewildered by the decision. It happened pretty much in kind of the corner where I was in Hampden on Tuesday. There's no arms in the air. You can tell, you've seen enough games where if players are getting in and they want to leave a bit on them, or, there's a bit of a forceful movement of the elbows. There was absolutely none of that. How this referee could look at that challenge and think that that's happened, I've got no idea. And it won't happen because we're a very, very small fish in a huge pond. But this should lend weight to the argument that if you're talking about game-changing decisions, such as second yellows, I think that you have to introduce VAR at that point. I don't want VAR for first bookings. I want to make that clear. UEFA don't want that either, because they don't want VAR to disrupt the flow of the game by unnecessary delays. But when it comes to a game-changing, and in our case, a very, very, very costly decision, then it's a huge problem. And honestly, I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen the replay. I try and play a bit of devil's advocate with my refereeing background to say, like, what has he seen? Like, what's made him think that? I'm still at a loss. It's just incredibly poor, and we've no idea what will happen to him if he might get taken out of the rotation or whatever. But at this level, it's so incredibly disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there, it's not even a foul. That's the thing. And the referee can't have seen an elbow because there wasn't one. So to me, I think he's saw the Kiev player go down, assumed there's an elbow, and then taken the action. And I think as a referee, doing something of that important, you've got to be 100% on it. That's looking to send the player off as opposed to looking to or being forced into doing so. So yeah, it was an absolutely shambolic decision. This isn't hindsight because I did mention it at half time that I thought maybe take Shefty off because he did have a couple of tackles, a couple of fouls, minor ones, not yellows, but they taught up, and that might have been playing in the referee's mind when he did that. But I would have taken him off at half time, yeah, because of that. Manager chose not to, and could legitimately say, by the way, he shouldn't have been sent off. So it maybe wasn't a mistake. But I just thought, given as you say, I thought you could tell pretty early on the ref was buying pretty much anything when they went down. That you had to be careful with them in the circumstances, and it was just an unnecessary risk. So I do think that Clement got that wrong. But that shouldn't take away from the fact it's an absolutely disgraceful decision. It really was to see it at this level of football. And you're right, incidentally, it's an anomaly in the VAR rules that they'll check for a straight red, both pro and against, to uphold or rescind it. And they'll check for penalties. And the reasons given by IFAB correctly are, well, these are massive game changing decisions. So you don't get, like a throw in or whatever. That would be ridiculous. And I think we all agree with that. But the massive game changing decisions go, and yet with a second yellow they don't. So I would agree. I would suggest that a second yellow, because fouls are subjective, and one referee will look at something and say that's a yellow card, and another ref will say I'll err on the side of caution there. So you could still have a situation where the ref goes to have a look at it and said, no, I'm quite happy with my decision, which is something I think we do need to see more of. Incidentally, it shouldn't be automatic. But in a situation like that, where anyone looking at it would say, it's not a foul, the ref should be able to come back on and say, no, right, rescind that. You're still on a yellow, as you say, Cammy. The first one is stands regardless. But no, the second one, no. And, you might still be unlucky in that your first booking wasn't a booking, and you get a second yellow and go off, and you'll complain about the first one. But I would argue then you still give the manager the chance to substitute the player or whatever. So therefore it doesn't necessarily wreck the whole game. But for us after that, we were really up against it. And this is, I think, Cammy, where the limitations of the squad kicked in a little bit, because the two things I thought Rangers' shape was good. I thought we defended compactly and well, but we couldn't get out. We couldn't get out because, one, we didn't have a ball carrier with pace who could take the ball into the corners, a la Ryan Kent would do for us in Europe, and we didn't have a striker who could hold the ball up. Dessers had one of his nights where every ball that came into him bounced off him and scudded off about 10 yards. So that, I think, meant that it was just this constant game in our half, players having to work really hard 20, 30 yards from our goal. We couldn't get out. We couldn't take them up the park in the way that we needed to. And eventually pressure told.
Yeah, listen, I agree with all of that. I think, and we're going to come on to Cyril Dessers, I think, in terms of the and what he could offer us. Anyone,
well, it's simple. It's simple with Cyril Dessers. He's a finisher, and he can finish. And that's great. And that's why you need to have different options available. And this is the problem with Rangers squad at the moment, that we have on the bench Danilo, who the manager doesn't feel, for whatever reason, could come on. So we end up even needing a goal-sending proper up front, as opposed to bringing the striker on to do it. You need to have different options for different situations in games. When you're creating chances and you've got a lot of the ball, then Dessers is fine. When, though, you need someone to hold the ball, win you free kicks in the edge of the opposition half, get you 20, 30 yards up the park, he's not got the skill set to do that. So that's when you need to go to someone else, but we didn't have the someone else.
Yeah, the Danilo thing is a bit of an anomaly. And to your point earlier on, which I agree with, by the way, it felt, and this is certainly true of the Motherwell game last Saturday, where I felt that the challenge that we've got in terms of we like to make it hard for ourselves. And I think had we been able to start with our strongest 11, and if we impose on the game with a purposeful design and a strong energy to be able to almost, to a certain extent, put both of those games to bed early doors, then we get that, the opportunity for Danilo to be able to come on, get him some minutes. Now, neither you nor I expect him to be able to play any, as I say, concerted length of time, given the way how the managers protected him. There's also a part of me, David, that really wonders, given what happened to Cortez, as to whether or not he's gun shy in terms of risking Danilo, because he doesn't want to aggravate an injury. If Danilo believes that he's ready to play, I still think the manager has to be able to try and make a decision. And I think what he's very, very concerned about is putting Danilo in the park, something happening in terms of a tweak or a stretch or something going on, maybe even a collision, and obviously he has suffered from that before. But he just doesn't want to risk him unless it's entirely necessary. And I think for me, that's why a lot of the Rangers fans are thinking, well, Tuesday it was necessary, and he still didn't feature. Albeit I understand the context that, again, we're down to 10 at that point. To give Cyril Dessers some credit, he was up against a fighting battle at this stage because he was getting drawn further and further back and having to do a lot of additional running as soon as Kiev effectively came into our half and camped there. But it feels a lot to me like as if he just won't risk him until he's 100% certain that he can be involved. And we're not giving him that opportunity because we're making these games tougher than they have to be.
I don't think we are. And the reason for that, Cammy, is that I think that this is kind of the level of the team. I think it would be nice if we could say, that they've got gears to go up, and hopefully they do. But at the moment, I haven't seen much evidence for it. I think there are certain things we could do differently. Like at the moment, the manager is wedded to playing Lawrence as a 10, and I think we'd be better off at the moment with another midfielder in there, say Dujon Sterling, and pushing Diamande forward a wee bit, because I don't think Lawrence is doing enough to justify having him in that role. But you look round the team. Jack Butland, good goalkeeper, fine, that's no problem. Fullbacks, Tav, was struggling, got done for pace a few times the other night, hasn't been contributing as much going forward as you might have expected. Ridvan on the other wing, injury prone, so to me it always seems as though he's kind of either getting back to his best or trying to find form from it, because he never gets a really settled run in the team. Centre backs, got a new one in, hopefully that'll gel. They were fine the other night, no problems there. Midfield, Barron and Dio have got ability, impressed in flashes so far, but I think they are being left 3v2 because you've got Lawrence in there who isn't doing enough creatively, I think, to justify being the man down the midfield. In the wide areas, we're weak. That's why I think we're also desperate that Czerny turns out to be good, because we know that the other wingers who are there are not particularly great. And we have one striker who has pluses and minuses. So I'm not sure it is a case of saying, well, we make life difficult for ourselves. I think that they are doing the best they can. And at the moment, it just isn't the level that we need as a club.
Fair. I think for me, it just felt a little bit, like you say, against Motherwell on Saturday, I know that we're profligate in front of goal at the best of times. We know that Dessers will take a number of attempts before he manages to get even a second goal. Obviously, we got the first half that we needed in terms of the Czerny goal as well, and gave us a nice bit of a little bit of a kind of relaxing point. But I didn't really feel too relaxed until we got to the end of the game, and I thought that Motherwell were certainly coming into the closing phase a little bit stronger. Against Kiev, I think that it did feel a little bit like we had to kind of feel them out within the first half. Again, I think for me, I would just like to see us impose ourselves a little bit more, but that is, it's difficult because of a number of factors, as well as the ones that you've mentioned, and we could question where players are at in terms of ability to now and what contribution they can make. There's not, I don't think, a great deal of confidence within that team at the moment. But yeah, as I say, it's something which I think the manager's alluded to in terms of saying he doesn't believe that he'll see the best Rangers team until October, November kind of time. That feels a long way away at the moment.
It certainly does. And as I say, when I look around the squad, to me, I think that without players coming in, then what we're getting is what we'll get. I don't think that that's particularly unfair. As I say, there's a couple of things I would change, but I'm not the manager. For me, as I say, Lawrence would drop out, Sterling would come in. but we need quality. We've known that. This is not new. We have got rid of several regular players who were first team players last season and weren't good enough, incidentally. That's why we needed to change. But so far, what we've brought in hasn't, I think, even hit the level of the guys who've left yet. So unless we do get players in this next 2.5 weeks, any improvement that the manager manages to make, I think will be very impressive, because I just don't, we're not going to turn the wide players, for example. It's unlikely at this point that Wright and Matondo are suddenly going to burst into life and be the creative forces we needed. I don't think that's going to happen. So you need to get in players who are going to help. As I say, he's playing Lawrence in the number 10 role because obviously he's got the situations with Cantwell and Hadji, so it doesn't look they're going to be considered, and they obviously want to get them out the door. Lowry has never really grabbed his opportunity. I'd be the first to admit that, even though I do think the boy's got talent. But to me, I think sometimes, Cammy, you need to look at what you have and say, right, I want to play with a number 10, but I don't have a reliable one at the moment, so I can't. And you change and you cut your cloth accordingly. And I do think that's something Clement needs to do. But unless we get in better players, then it's difficult to see where the improvement would come from.
Have you got any priorities in mind in terms of that, given the fact we've got a couple of weeks now until the window closes? As typically I'm always looking ahead towards the Old Firm game at the end of the month. But I think we're at the stage now where, it's almost like that perfect conundrum. We need to be able to try and have some fresh intake in there. It feels at the moment that we do have assets that are sitting there that we cannot shift on at the moment. It's difficult now, obviously, in terms of where we're at financially, given the blow of Tuesday night and our exit from the qualifiers. Where do you feel at the moment just now we need to focus on before the end of the month?
First choice midfielders, striker and winger, certainly. In an ideal world, I would like full backs and a centre back as well, but I think those are the absolute priority positions, but not youngsters, not guys who are coming in to boost the size of the squad. We need first team players, and be it Cammy that it needs to be loans or whatever, we still need to go and do that and make those deals. Because I think we do need an injection of quality. I think we need an injection of freshness. And I think we also need a boost as a club and as a support. We're in a particularly difficult situation at the moment. We're playing at a stadium that we don't like as a support. And at the moment, I just look at the team and there's nobody in there that I think has the imagination of the fans, has captured the imagination or that the fans can hang our hats on. So you need to deliver those kind of players. If we don't, then I think what you have is an average squad that will have good days and will have some bad days. And I think that would be the pattern throughout the season. And of course, at Rangers, when you have regular bad days, then confidence decreases, and inversely, so does the amount of bad days, because the players lose the belief that they have. So it can be a tricky situation. If it's not resolved in the window, then I think what we're getting is what we'll get.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, we've looked at and we've spoken about him a lot, again, like you say, both on these shows and on our Patreon site, in terms of the impact that Conor Barron has had, for example. I'm a big fan of Conor Barron. I think he does a lot of selfless work within the team. I could see him on Tuesday night certainly dropping a little bit further back. It felt a little bit to me like as if he was having to come back a bit because Suter was having to come out on the right-hand side because, a few times where the ball got away from Tav, he couldn't make up the ground. Barron's coming in and getting it deep. He's looking to be able to try and play it further forward. There is that gap. I agree with you in terms of the number 10 and what Lawrence is doing within there. But I think that the difficulty with that is that, as you say, being able to try and bring in players on loan, that if we look at any players within our, domestic locale, then it's going to be difficult for us to be able to bring in players unless it's going to have to be a transfer, which means we're going to have to expand our market quite considerably, as far as I can see. But obviously, the board has to then take responsibility for the shambles that we're in. When we look at players like Yanis Hadji, we can't get rid of him. The Cifuentes deal has been confirmed, but it's a loan without an obligation to buy. We have Todd Cantwell completely out of the picture. And we know that these players will have to leave, and the board are going to have to step up the exit strategy for some of these players to free up some of that finance to be able to come in, even if we bring in loans and we can at least make the wages attractive, because typically that's the deciding factor for a lot of players to be able to come. We've lost the glamour of the Champions League, but obviously we do have Europa League football. That feels a lot to me like as if, is it cart before horse, or how would we strategize being able to try and do that so that within the time frame that we have, we do make the changes that need to happen?
Yeah, we do. And as I say, I go back to the fact, Cammy, that I think you need to try and lift the mood a little bit. And I mentioned this the other night in my post-match video, that yes, there are times, particularly in games, when the crowd need to lift the players, and we understand that. But there are also times when the club needs to lift the support. And I think we're in one of those at the moment, because I think the support have put up with an awful lot over the last few years. We're not in this position by accident. We're in this position due to incompetence, bad decisions being made time after time. And, if you look at John Bennett's tenure, it's been disastrous as chairman. There's no other way, I think, to put it, because we are in a weaker position than when he took over. That's just a fact on the pitch. And he might point to things off the pitch, and that's fair enough. But where it really matters, the key things, Rangers are in a worse position than we were 2 years ago when he stepped into that position. That's because of decisions he's taken, giving Beale the transfer money, etc., those kind of things, agreeing to the stadium thing, although I know that he said that he was misled on that can happen. But, things like a CEO, that is within his gift, that is within his control to appoint that. And coming into the summer, there can have been no illusions about what we needed. Now, we might not be able to afford it all in one go, but we should still be further along than we are, let's be honest. And that is on him. And I think that the relationship between the club and the fans is damaged at the moment, and it's been damaged by these constant bad decisions over the last few years. So the club need to face up to that and start trying to put it right. At the moment, I don't see enough from them that they're trying to put it right. And I think that in any business, when you're under pressure, I've been there, you have, I'm sure a lot of the listeners have, in a workplace, that you tend to get defensive and batten down the hatches. And that's all well and good, but it isn't going to work. The situation remains the same. People can see it for what it is. Nobody is making things up here and looking at it. And yes, some of the language might be more hyperbolic than you or I would use, but it doesn't change the basic fact. Rangers are miles off being the team on the park that we need to be. And the people in charge, it's their responsibility to fix that.
I think what I'm most worried about in that regard, well, I suppose the two things I'm most worried about is these are not new problems. Everything that we've discussed, I think that we've certainly seen months ahead of the end of last season. We had I suppose I'm going to call it now, the kind of artificial uplift in tempo, because we managed to get together a league challenge. It dissipated, obviously. Okay, you can understand that. But the reason why it dissipated is because we knew that we had to be able to get rid of a number of players. We needed that rebuild. We needed that overhaul. Okay, that's fine. But we still had players that we knew were going to be moved. And yet here we are now in the middle of August, where that's still the same situation. That's where we're at. And I don't know if that is because of a lack of CEO. I don't know if that is because of focus has been shifted elsewhere, whether it's a stadium, whether it's about the recruitment of players. I genuinely don't know. And I think the club have to take responsibility for that, Bennett especially, because that, I think, is a big part of the frustration that we all feel at the moment, is that if we'd had a mass exodus, in the summer, and we had to be able to do that surgery to be able to make those changes, then okay, fair enough. But these are long-term problems. Cyril Dessers is not an August problem. He has been a problem for a number of months now in terms of being overutilised. And whilst I appreciate that he's got returning goals, I caveat that with the amount of minutes that he's played. And the second issue, which I think, as I say, is really on my mind at the moment, is that if we've got that lack of reaction, where's our proactivity in terms of being able to resolve those larger scale problems, the CEO position, for example? Now, again, from a corporate perspective, you've worked in it, I've worked in it, a number of the listeners have worked in it. I appreciate that's not an easy needle to thread. But that all being said, it's not the only problem that we have at the moment. The stadium has been a disaster. I do appreciate that we have had to accommodate that problem. We're all hoping that we'll get back into that time scale, but my sincere hope is that if we're not, then the club tell us as soon as possible. The player ins and outs are going to have to be dealt with. And it just feels to me at the moment just now as if the club are a little bit asleep at the wheel. And where you want that, I'm not even going to say that because I think it's beyond words now. I think we need to see that action happening and to prove, the intentions of the board are justifiable by producing change and by producing those actions. It's just at the moment, I just feel like as if that is just not on the radar just now. And that's what really worries me because, you've said it yourself. I don't want us to get to the situation of, well, we're just going to have to deal with what we've got because we haven't been able to fix all of these other problems. And it's difficult for me to swallow that professional businessmen feel that this is in any way an acceptable way to run a business.
Yes, I agree. And I think that it's not a revelation on anyone's part to say that there are a lot of problems. We keep hearing from the club, people are working very hard, but we're not seeing the results of that. That's the issue. We're not seeing the results of that as supporters. And if this had just been, we had one bad season after several good ones last year, then I could understand. They're calling for patience. Patience requires belief, and the belief has been sapped. So now words and calls and all the rest of it aren't going to do anything in terms of bringing that back. Actions will. And at the moment, we are seeing a lack of actions, a lack of things coming in. So what are the actions, right? Progress on the stadium. What's happening there, right? What's the next step? Signings coming in the door, players going out the door. All of these are things that make a difference. But at the moment, they're not happening, and therefore people are very frustrated. Now, the attendance the other night, ground wasn't full. It'll be nowhere near full on Saturday. And that is a form of protest, and it's one the board would do well to pay heed to, because when Rangers fans get to a certain level, that's what they do. They go, okay, I'll vote with my feet. And that's historically been the case. And it's actually, I think, the most valid way, because it makes it utterly clear. First, you've got the visual thing of the half-empty ground, but secondly, you're saying, no, you're not getting my money if you're not going to do anything useful with it. And yeah, that can lead to problems, obviously, but at the moment, where Rangers are, that nothing seems to be changing. A lot of words about change happen, but very little is actually happening on the part, and that looks as though it's taking us to a better place. So until we start to see signs of it, Cammy, you can't blame fans for saying they don't know what they're doing. And as difficult as the board might find that, and as upset as they may be or unfair as they might feel it is, it doesn't change the fact. Look where the club is. Look at the noises that are coming from ex-players, etc. This is not just the fans being over-demanding or entitled or the rest of it. We're asking for things that haven't been achieved over the last couple of years. I mean, basic competence in places such as with the medical team, such as with the stadium. These are things that have been taken away. And there is a sense, and I think a deserved sense, that they continually make the wrong decisions and do the wrong things. And that's why I think, incidentally, that in terms of Bennett saying, right, well, I'll fix this, you haven't shown any aptitude so far in the time you've been chairman to suggest you can do this. Hire a chief exec, pick a good one, someone who's ran a football club, by the way, not someone who's coming into it as his first CEO job. Pick a CEO and then step back. And we need to stop this culture at Rangers where investors want everything run by them. That has to stop as well. A board should meet once a month and oversee what's going on and discuss it, sure, but the day-to-day running needs to be left to the person that you hire to do that. Rangers haven't had that in years, if at all, because Robertson didn't have that authority, and we need to fix the behind-the-scenes thing as well as on the park. On the park is priority, but I'm not sure you can do one without the other.
Yeah, like I say, it's going to be a very, very tough needle to thread, but, John Bennett wanted the responsibility. He has it now. He has to be able to then as I say, make those changes and been able to make those appointments and fundamentally do what he wants to do. He cannot use the phrase "best in class" anytime soon. I don't think it's fair to say. Just we've spoken a little bit on the team and obviously the board. I'm keen to get your thoughts, David, in terms of where you feel the fans are at the moment in terms of the manager. He was obviously given the year's contract extension a few weeks ago. The thing that's always struck me about Philippe Clement whenever I've heard him speak and whenever he's mentioned about the recruitment process that brought him into the club was that he was obviously sold in the idea of that change and been able to see where the club and the direction it was going into. I don't think he'll ever say publicly that he was he was hamstrung in terms of what would happen. He was given the full picture. But I'm seeing more sentiment now towards focus on the manager. The club have quite clearly indicated that they believe in him. But I also get the impression from him that he is not going to be, he's not going to accept working with one hand tied behind his back. If he can't get the changes that he needs, then I think he's going to cut a very frustrated figure. And I think that where the fans now start to direct some of that towards him is where, there may be things like, as you mentioned earlier on, the Sterling gap in midfield, being able to try and address where he sees players not playing up to their full potential. But I do worry that some of that is going to move towards him and a bit of focus on him now as well. I want to back him, but I want him to be able to try and give me that emphasis to back him as well.
There are a few factors at play here. It's not, I think, a simple black and white issue. Is it a shitty situation for any manager at Rangers? Yes. Is there a groundswell of opinion that Rangers should be getting rid of Philippe Clement? No, I don't think so. I think actually the opposite. I think there's an understanding that we can't keep chopping and changing managers. Has he been backed enough in this window? Nowhere near. Clearly not. So all of those factors are true. However, you are allowed to criticise, if you like, the controllables he controls. And that is team selection, tactics, are players improving? I think that one of the things that Rangers managers won't get post-Bale is this idea of, well, he needs his own players and then suddenly everything will magic up. You need to work with what you've got. You're doing any business, any job you go in, and you've got to work with what's there. Everyone would like more resources in any job. It doesn't work like that. So you can talk about our players improve and is the system good. All of those are fair comments, but I don't sense any real, other than just, the frustration that results. I don't sense any desire that anyone is wanting his head on a pike or anything like that. I think there is an understanding of the shitstorm that he has faced, but yeah, you are still allowed, and it's perfectly valid to say, for example, why is player X playing when I don't think he's doing enough? Why are we not doing this or doing that? That's the right of any football fan at any club, and no matter how successful or otherwise, that is the right of every football fan. At the end of the day, the manager stands or falls by the decisions they make when it comes to the playing staff, and that's what will happen here.
Well, let's look forward then, David, to St Johnstone at Hampden at 5:30 on Saturday. I'm going to be honest here. This is part of where I feel, and maybe it's archaic thinking on my part, but I always go back to that quote of, I'll worry about who you're playing on Saturday because there should be a response. Rangers cannot take the game lightly. I don't think for a minute they will. Early rounds of the League Cup, to me, again, I always think, well, could we give X player a chance and blah, blah. We're not in that position at the moment. No, it is going to be our pretty much our strongest team that we can muster. We haven't had an update at time of recording in terms of the injury to Ridvan Yilmaz. He will obviously be missing regardless. So we will undoubtedly see some changes. The big thing for me, and maybe I'm clinging on to that hope, is that if it is the case that we manage to make the game as simple as we can and get the result in nice and early, then we do have the opportunity to see guys like Danilo have been able to try and come in, see some rotation round, etc., etc. But ultimately, Rangers have to come out with a response. You've mentioned, I agree with you, by the way. I think Hampden will be pretty much half empty on Saturday. But Rangers have got to utilise this opportunity now to say, look, we can start to have an uplift, and we want to be able to see a really strong performance. get the fans believing in it a wee bit more, because Rangers fans will, and I think you are right, by the way, that there is this hope in all of us that, we'll turn the corner, that we will be able to put in a degree of consistency across the coming games up to the international break. Obviously, the Old Firm game will take care of itself. But it starts on Saturday for me to be able to say, right, let's really just try and see what we can, and let's show what we can do. If we've been having challenges with that beforehand because of a new stadium and unfamiliar surroundings, Champions League qualifiers, etc., I get all of that. But this is as domestic as it gets in terms of where we can go out to try and impose ourselves. It has to be, for me, a chance for Rangers to come out now and just really show what we can do when we've got the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the age-old question: where do we go from here? Well, we go to the next game, and we worry about it when it comes up. And we now, because we don't have a qualifier next week, unfortunately, we have a full week between that game to Ross County. So I agree with you. I don't think we're in a position to be resting players or any of that nonsense. I think we need to put it our strongest side, because I think they need to lift the support a little bit with the performance. I think the team needs to go out and play on the front foot, make the game happen. We know St Johnstone will understand the mood of the support and will try and frustrate us. I would expect plenty of time wasting and shithousing. It's a Craig Levein team anyway. They're coming off the back of a very good result. They went to Kilmarnock last week and scudded them 3-0, which is a very good result for any side in the SPFL. So they'll be confident that they'll be able to do a shock, and their aim, and they'll be talking about all week, is turn the crowd, get the crowd on their backs, and it's up to Rangers to prevent that. And you prevent that by seizing the initiative, by making a fast start, by going out on the front foot, and as you say, by putting the opposition team under pressure and giving the fans something to react to. So I think it's absolutely key to do that. I think that, as you say, it's a full strength 11 for me, because I don't think we're in a position to take anyone for granted where we currently are. And we need to build some A, confidence, and B, momentum. So that's what Saturday needs to be. It needs to be an opportunity to do that. And look, there is no excuse if Rangers, Hampden or not, go out of a cup to St Johnstone. There is absolutely no excuse for that. I do expect us to win. I'm like you. I expect a reaction. I would hope that the players are using the bad decision. It goes both ways. While we can look at it, I hope the players are using the bad decision the other night as fuel and a sense of injustice and want to go and take it out on someone. And I hope it's a Saturday.
Yep, very much agree. And as I say, I want to make sure that the players realise that that's their opportunity. And again, as I say, I hope we take full advantage of it as well. David, that will do us for this week on Extra. You will be back with Flagship on Monday. We'll be back to regular scheduling.
Yes.
If you want to be able to get a whole host of Rangers content, then please join us on our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Just before we go, a special mention as well to our show sponsors, NordVPN. You can get a discount if you wish to take out a VPN subscription with them by using nordvpn.com/Heart and Hand as well. Please jump over and take advantage of that. David, it's a tough time. I think we've had a very honest discussion in terms of where things are at. The only way is up, as the song goes.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you so much for coming on. And again, like I say, always appreciate the time to talk to you.
Pleasure, mate.
Thank you to the executive producers and Mike Lee and Paul Myers. We'll be back with you again on Monday. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.